welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and this is episode 3. And you might remember from the first couple of episodes, I mentioned that in the very first part of any episode, I want to make sure that I give you your gain right up front, because this is Losses Become Gains after all, right? And by that, I just mean I want to be transparent with you, and I want to let you know what you are going to gain from any particular episode right up front. So the gain for today's episode is I want you to join me in beginning to wrap our heads around where to even begin understanding grief, where to even start with feeling it, where to start coping with it in ways that can actually stick and actually work. And I want to start this off with a really interesting and very powerful quote that stuck with me as I was doing my grief coaching certification. And that is, we learn 911, we learn CPR, we learn emergency preparedness. We need to know these things for what may or may not happen. But what is inevitable? Death. You can't postpone, cancel, or delete it from your calendar. It doesn't discriminate. So why are we so unprepared? It's pretty impactful, right? And there are a lot of reasons for this, really. First, sadly, there is still a long way to go with our society in terms of acceptance of loss. For example, to give more time off to the bereaved when they lose someone. I mean, that would be a nice place to start, right? But also to get more comfortable thinking about it like it's not this crazy taboo topic or subject, to not wince or feel uncomfortable when addressing it or asking someone how they're doing or being scared to do that. Because I think most grievers would agree, just saying something, acknowledging it is better than saying nothing. Or, again, to piggyback off that stepping on eggshells feeling that so many people have when so often grievers want to talk about it. We want to talk about our loved ones, or we might need to vent a little bit. Now, are there people who don't want to talk about it or show emotion? Absolutely. And you know what? Some days that's what we need. And I want to say here, and I almost want to give permission in a way if you need this today, that if you need a break from your grief or crying or lamenting or feeling shame or guilt or regret over something, give yourself that. We can't be on with our grief 24/7. We would go absolutely mad, right? On this podcast, we are 100% going to acknowledge the plethora of different emotions and how to cope with them. But we are not going to bottle things up. That is not the vibe here. And that is not a healthy way to cope with our grief. I want you to embrace these emotions and know that they are painfully normal. None of this is to be ashamed of, no matter what norms or expectations are put on us from friends, family, colleagues, society, any of it. And I want to acknowledge that, like that earlier quote implied, you perhaps weren't ready for the loss that you might be seeking guidance from this podcast for. And who can really be ready for a major loss? But if death is inevitable, why aren't we more equipped? I honestly don't have an answer to that, but that is why I'm here, and that's what we're going to dig into more here together. I mean, for example, I lost my mom in December of 2019, and just because I lost my dad 6 months later didn't mean I was ready for that. I mean, I guess I knew what to expect in a way. Like, I definitely remember giving myself these pep talks where I was like, okay, remember XYZ happened last time. This is how I might feel. This is how it might be best to go about dealing with something, or this is what not to do. It was almost sort of a really twisted gift that I got from the universe from losing them both sort of back to back like that. I didn't have a lot of time to think in between the two. But again, each person and each journey is their own. And given my mom and dad were different people and I had a different relationship with both, I was going to grieve them a little differently and experience both deaths differently, right? So, for example, I knew the deep, profound emptiness and isolation I might feel as I knew my dad was closing in on death. But to feel that again when it actually happened, nothing could have prepared me. Not even the death of my mom just months before. And if you have suffered more than one loss, or if you ever do, you can probably empathize with this. But prepared or not, we find ourselves here, grieving and needing help. And I mean it so wholeheartedly when I say that I am here for you and can empathize with where you're at right now, at least on some level, right? We all have our different experiences with grief, but so many of the feelings and the emotions can be really similar across the board. What we're going to dig into here in this podcast is how to heal your heart, your soul, and your mind in a way that is as permanent as possible. And I mean that in a sense that while our grief might continue to ebb and flow, you'll continue to walk away with countless coping tools and new ways of thinking about your grief that you won't even know what to do with yourself. And between myself and some absolutely phenomenal guests that will be here, my hope is that you see and feel hope, even though you might not be there right now, which, hey, I understand there's no judgments here, remember? But I am asking you right now to open up. If not fully yet, because you are maybe just so broken and maybe it's the early days of all of the grief that you're feeling, that is absolutely okay. I am not putting any requirement that you need to be there right now. And by the way, I am also sending you all of the love and the support if that is the case. But if this is you, or even if your loss is a little further removed right now, you're just really struggling, all I'm going to ask you to do today is to open up like just a crack. Open your heart and your mind and your soul to the vast amount of knowledge and the vast amount of gains that you are going to discover here. Because I've said it before, I'll say it again, we're going to have our grief work for us, right? And that is super, super empowering. So with that, let's dig into what grief really, quote unquote, is and go from there. And I want to set the expectation to kick this off with the fact that there is no cure for grief in the normal sense. It is simply not that black and white, and you likely know that already. And I'm going to say something that is sometimes a hard concept to grasp if you haven't yet, but it's important to remember. And it's very humbling to hear that your life as you know it probably won't ever look the same. That is kind of a heavy idea, so let that sink in for a second. And again, you might already be feeling this, and maybe that's exactly what brings you here. You might be like, Tara, I get it. I know that. Thanks for stating the obvious. My question is, now what? And I hear you. Life's biggest losses can disconnect us from our sense of who we are and can set into motion this powerful process of not only relearning ourselves, but also our new world, because it is new in so many ways. For many, there's this desire to, quote, make sense and, quote, find meaning in the wake of loss. And you know what? That's beautiful. And that is kind of in a way what we're doing here. But what I found most interesting in all of my grief work and studies around grief is that there's also a growing awareness that loss can give us, and this possibility of, life-enhancing post-traumatic growth, if you will, as we integrate the losses and the lessons of our losses, I should say, and this resilience into how we move forward. And I say resilience not to put pressure on you or to feel like you have to be strong and resilient all the time. Not at all what I mean. I mean that in the sense of personal growth. Personal growth following these seismic experiences of loss is super common. And that's what I want to help you work on and tap into. And we're going to have some fun as we do it, I promise. It's how we adapt to our hardships and how that shapes who we become. So I want to make crystal clear here that there is room for growth, for understanding, a level of acceptance, a level of peace and gratitude for what is in front of you amidst your loss. That's kind of a bright spot in all of this, right? And if you're here listening to this podcast right now, you've probably gone through a fairly detrimental loss and are trying to figure out where you're even at. What does your present look like and how to deal and cope with your day-to-day life? What your past really means for you now, which you might be appreciating a bit differently right now, but also, and almost more importantly, what your future holds. Life as you know it might not be the same, but it doesn't mean you can't find meaning and purpose beyond the work. We have to remember that grief is never eradicated, it's only experienced. And we must cherish the memories that we have while embracing the future. That's this balance that we're going to try and find. And it's not going to be balanced 24/7. Pure balance all the time is not sustainable. There's that ebb and flow that I was talking about before, okay? And another really important aspect is that grief has to be faced relentlessly, no matter how painful, for our emotional wounds to heal. It's necessary to feel hurt, to feel loneliness and anguish almost until it feels familiar. Then it can be accepted as part of life and used sort of at this new starting point. This process is considered successful grief work. It is approaching a point where life can be started anew. That's where the growth really begins. And I want to quickly share 5 facts about grief to ponder as I leave you today and as you move through life, really, from this moment on as well. Fact number 1, we grieve because we've loved. Fact number 2, the emotions of grief are normal and natural. Number 3, your grief is unique to you. Number 4, the way out of your grief is to work through it, but with no expectations of there being a quote other side to it, or that you even need to get there quickly. We kind of just have to buckle up and enjoy the ride here a little bit. But guess what? There is a big, massive community of grievers that can help us all along. We are all in it together. And lastly, grief can teach us something about life if we allow it to. So I want for you to think about this and everything we talked about here today. And again, just crack that door open just a little bit. What can and what will your grief teach you? I want you to think about that today. Maybe even journal it if that feels right to you. All right, I will leave it there for you today because that in and of itself, everything we just talked about, can be a lot to process sometimes. So really, I want for you, again, to tap into this, really start thinking about this and unlocking these things for yourself. And I promise it is a really beautiful process. Is it filled with some pain? Yes, sometimes it is. But it's those 1,000 paper cuts sometimes that we have to feel and endure that also begins to unlock this beautiful new side of life that is so much more fulfilling and meaningful and intentional than we could ever imagine. As always, I am very grateful you're here and investing your time and listening to all of the amazing things that we have going on here at Losses Become Gains. So with that, I will see you next time.